Hello, everyone, and welcome to XCM Educate's Expert Speaker Series, XCM Scheduler for Clarity and Control of Resources and Deliverables. My name is Amy Silvestri, and I will be the host today. During this session, Justina Iso, Project Manager, and Kristen Settlers, Project Manager Consulting Services, will discuss how XCM Scheduler can help drive increased productivity by proactively identifying bottlenecks, balancing resource capacity. The webinar will then open for Q&A. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this webinar. XCM Solutions is registered with NASBA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE Sponsors. As such, we are excited to offer 1 CPE credit for today's webinar. A total of 4 polls will be conducted throughout the presentation, and you will need to participate in 3 polls in order to receive CPE credit. Your CPE certificate will be sent to the email you used to register for the webinar within 72 hours after the session. If you do not receive your certificate, please email us at xcmclientservices@xcmsolutions.com. Please note, CPE is not available when viewing the on-demand version of this webinar. If you experience difficulty answering the polling questions, please type your answer in the questions pane of the control panel, and we will ensure you receive credit for those questions. You will also have the opportunities to submit text questions by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will be sure to follow up afterwards. A recording of the session will be sent out to you 24 hours after the close of the session. We will also post the recording and PowerPoint presentation on our Help Center. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Justina and Kristen.
Thanks, Amy, for that introduction. So as Amy mentioned, I am Kristen Settlers. I have been with XCM for about 4 years now. In my prior life, I worked at a public accounting firm in Boston for 15 years, both on the firm administration side and the practice side of the house. And I was lucky or unlucky enough to have one of my positions be that of scheduler. So scheduling is near and dear to my heart. I'm very happy to be with you today to talk with you about our scheduling product and helping you navigate some of your scheduling difficulties and just going over the different components. So our scheduler product is comprised of 2 main components. We have the Resource Allocator, also known as the RAS. And I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of the RAS and how it works, how it flows through the configuration all the way to the hours dashboard, and also go through the reporting capabilities of the RAS. Justina is going to go through the calendar-based scheduling module, also known as the CAL, which has a couple different pieces to it. We have the scheduling by employee, also known as the SBE page, the schedule by task, known as the SBT page. You may have also noticed, if you are using our product, that there's been a new enhancement, and we have a staffing management page, which is really awesome for helping bulk manage staffing assignments. Justina is also going to go through my calendar and how it's used, and also go through the different reports associated with the calendar. We're also going to go through the tools that are available to you in the XCM Scheduler, how to sort of set yourself up for success. Part of that being the user profile, or our managed users utility, where you can integrate things such as department, niche, expertise, helping import budgets or getting your budget hours into the scheduler, and then also our Outlook integration. As Amy mentioned during the housekeeping, we will keep the chat box open for questions, and also, if we have enough time, reserve a few minutes at the end for questions. So actually, before I go ahead and launch and talk about the typical scheduling process, I'm going to go ahead and put out a polling question just so that we can see what you're scheduling with today, or maybe not scheduling with. Let me go ahead and launch that question. And if you can go ahead and take a moment and answer that question. So it's, what are you currently using to schedule? Is it the Resource Allocator, Resource Allocation Scheduler, our Calendar Scheduler, Excel, other products, or maybe you don't even schedule? So just going to give that a minute or so. Okay, and it looks pretty close between, we have folks using our scheduler product, but we also have 27% of you that are currently using Excel spreadsheets. So happy to go through and talk about the scheduling process and the rest of our scheduling product. I'm gonna go ahead and close the question. Thanks for your responses. Okay, so regardless of if you are using Excel to schedule or you're currently using our scheduling product, there's a process that occurs at any firm, regardless of whether you're using a product or not, right? Because we all have client work and we all have staff that we need to keep busy. So first off, you know, the client work comes in, maybe you had put out a proposal and you won that work, maybe you were waiting on an engagement letter. In any event, you have a project come in or a task. So now we need to figure out the staffing, and that can take on many different forms. So if you have a dedicated resource management team, they'll take over the process and try to find available resources that seem to be available for the requested period of time that you're going to need a resource on that job. You know, and the scheduler, it can be, you know, a resource team, it can be one person, you might have your manager scheduling, you might have your admin scheduling. I've heard all things across the implementations that I've done and just in my own experience. So whomever that person is that is responsible for taking care of the scheduling and making sure that that client has resources available, they're going to go ahead and book that through whatever mechanism you're using. If you're using an Excel spreadsheet, that might involve a year's worth of paper taped on a wall. We had done that at one point and we've marked it on the Excel, right? So I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. So you're going to book that resource and then you're going to go to the engagement lead and let them know that you've staffed the job. You're then going to reach out to the person that's been booked to let them know that they have this work scheduled and to have them reach out to the in charge for further instruction. So generally, if you have a scheduling team, there's a lot of time spent in meetings. There's a lot of emails, there's a lot of phone calls. At my firm, we would have a recurring meeting every 2 weeks where all of the practice leads would sit around the table and me with my PDF reports, because that was what was available from our antiquated scheduling system. And I'm marking up the changes on the reports, you know, going around the table, making sure everyone's busy, trying to fill any holes across practice areas. By the time I got back to my desk with these marked up changes, inevitably I would have received 2 emails, maybe a phone call, had a couple partners stop me on my way to the ladies' room, and I get back to my desk and that data is already outdated, okay? Oftentimes we would have a separate recurring meeting to discuss staff conflicts. You know, if say we had started one job and a big proposal came in and we needed to take that person, then we would need to talk about that. And again, you have all of these people with the highest bill rates in the firm in many cases, sitting around a table, spending hours determining how to spread out the staff, how to keep everyone happy, make sure everyone's billable. Another piece that people don't realize is part of the scheduling process is a lot of times schedulers or dedicated resource managers get pulled in for different items. So I would get pulled in for engagement review meetings because, you know what, I knew who was sitting on the bench. We had insight into people that were not getting booked for jobs, or maybe it wasn't the right type of engagement for them, but we would get pulled into review meetings. So it's a heavy hat to wear, and you have multiple jobs. So again, regardless of if you're using our scheduling product or using Excel spreadsheets, there's always a process to go through, and the goal here is to make it as easy as possible for everybody. So the XCM scheduler product, as I mentioned, has two main components. You have your resource allocation scheduler, the RAS, which is focused on present time. You can book multiple tasks per day. The reason why you can do that, and the reason why the resource allocation scheduler is such an easy lift, is because if you're using XCM workflow, you can use RAS. Why? Because you're moving tasks. And that's how the movement on the resource allocation scheduler happens. As people move tasks on and off of their MyView pages, that's what populates your hours dashboard known as the RAS. I'm going to actually show you the behind the scenes of how we configure that to help you understand how that information flows onto the dashboard. As I mentioned, it's tied to workflow. So as long as your tasks have a workflow mapping associated with them, they are able to be shown on the RAS. You're also going to want to make sure that you have your budget and actual hours in the system so that you can get the most value out of the RAS as well. And then on the other side, we have the calendar-based scheduler, or the CAL, which focuses mainly on future time. You can have both billable and personal bookings. So, you can book resources out in the field, for example, or maybe you're tracking through the RAS some tax work, but you also realize that there is a corporate return with a bunch of subsidiaries, and you want to book someone off for a week to work on that. You can do that as well. It's also great for booking CPE, PTO, and there's configuration needed with that. So your consultant will work with you to determine what type of job codes you need for your specific firm. It's very customized working with your consultant. There's also a heat map of staffing availability. So when we talk about, making sure that you're avoiding bottlenecks, these are the two easiest ways to see that and to make sure that not only are your people not underloaded, but they're not overloaded as well. Because the key to any firm's success is the happiness of their employees and keeping everyone chargeable. So now I'm going to go ahead and hop into the resource allocator itself. Go ahead. So hopefully all of you now know that when you log into XCM, you're going to come to your MyView page. First, before I actually go into the resource allocation module, I'm going to take you behind the scenes to go to the utilities. And some of the folks on the phone might know that this is your utilities gear. This is how we program everything behind the scenes. So to give you an idea of how we configure the RAS, I'm going to go to my settings and defaults. And again, this is not instructional for you to go in and set up. It's just to help you understand how the work flows through the RAS. So I'm going to go to my scheduler status grouping. And then I can see that I have different categories here. So if I am using XCM across multiple departments, there would be multiple categories listed here, and I can choose which one I want to configure one at a time. So the main thing, it's not hard to configure, is you're going to select two things. You're going to select the tasks that you want to track on the resource allocator. Generally, it would be all of your tasks. You may have a couple that you're not tracking time for. So choosing those tasks, again, they have to have a workflow mapping to show up in the list. It's just a pick list here, and then we bump them over. And then what we're going to do is, let's determine what statuses we want to show on the RAS. So we take out anything that's considered not started. So you're no info in and you're unassigned, because that's not on anyone's plate yet. We're not looking to capture through the users any hours associated with that. Then we're also going to come in and determine what do we consider completed. So most times when I'm configuring a firm, it's going to be your built-in e-file statuses. A lot of time assembly and shipping is being done on the admin side and those hours aren't being tracked. And then of course completed. So that's just a behind the scenes look so that you understand where that information that is showing up on your RAS hours dashboard is coming from. It's coming from here. So your tasks that you've chosen and the statuses that you've chosen that you want to keep track of. So I'm going to hop out of here. I'm going to go over to the scheduler, and the resource allocator is going to be the default. I'll know I'm on scheduler. You don't have to go to a different module because that little orange line will be there. So I can go in, and for workflow users, you can tell this looks a little bit like the advanced search. So you have a bunch of parameters that you can select. If you want to go ahead and select a certain role that you want to see, all of your preparers, or perhaps you want to look and see, a certain type of task, you can go ahead and make all of those selections. Now, as a former scheduler and a firm believer that we want to use as few clicks as possible, I highly recommend using the feature that we have here, which is the ability to save a filter. So if you've used our advanced search and you've ever saved a search there, you know that you can go ahead and click a button and it's going to bring you real-time results. Well, we can do the same thing in the RAS. So I'm just going to show you how you might do that. So let's just say I wanted to go ahead and see all of my tax seniors. So I can go ahead and select my role. I can click close. It's going to show me anything that I have selected in the middle here in the selected fields. So now if I want to save my filter, I can click the Save Filter button, and then I can give it a search name. A description. And then depending on my user right, I can choose where I want to save it. 99% of the time, you're going to want to save it at your user level because you're going to be the one that's going in and using that filter. So I select that and then I click Save. If I then want to go up and look at my filters, I can click on this View All Saved Filters. And it's going to show, here's the filter I just created. And I can just click that Run button there. Well, I've set up my own filter for this demonstration today. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as Kristen's team. So I don't have to go back and select different parameters. I certainly have that prerogative if I want to go back and do that. But for now, I'm going to use the saved filter. So I'm going to click Run. And it's going to go ahead and use the parameters that I've pre-selected. And I've kept it small for the purposes of the demonstration. So this is your RAS hours dashboard. And what this is going to do is this is going to capture two different views. So these are the tasks on my view. I like to refer to this as present day. So if I went and I looked at my view page, I could see what work I have on there now. But something that we're not necessarily capturing in other systems or other methods is the in process not on my view. What do I have coming down the pipeline back to me to work on? So I'm going to use Jamie as an example. So these are users that have been listed as RAS resources. And then there's a number of tasks that are associated with those users. So if I go ahead and I expand here, this is going to give me a list of all of the tasks that Jamie is associated with in a staffing assignment role. So I have hyperlinks to all of the routing or control sheets for these tasks. And it's going to give me some other task information. So it's going to show me task types here. If there's any description, period end. The key pieces here are that it's going to show you the budget, actual, and remaining hours that I had referred to earlier. So this here is the adjusted budget. So this is going to pull from the staffing assignment section in your routing or control sheet, which would take original budget plus or minus any change hours that you had listed. Then you will have your actual hours, so any hours that have been manually entered or flowed through from our practice management integration. And then you have remaining hours. So how many hours are left on that job or that task? Now, if I look, we can see I have a number of tasks. these hours here in these 3 columns tie up to the tasks on my view. So you might be wondering, how do I tell which of these tasks is this referring to? Well, the role for anything that's on your My View page currently is going to be italicized. So any work that's on your My View page right now is going to be here in italics. The work that's coming down the pike, you'll notice the roles are not going to be italicized. And what this might mean, the best example I could give is, let's say I'm a tax preparer and I had a task on my My View page in the preparation status. I completed the preparation status and I moved the task to the reviewer because that's how my workflow is set up. So it's going to come off of my My View page and it's going to move on to the My View page of the reviewer. From there, if Jamie's a preparer, she may have a workflow step that's mapped for open review points, and that's assigned to the preparer. So now I need to have hours allocated because that task is going to be coming back to Jamie once the reviewer is done with it. So that's the purpose of the in process, not My View. So I can see not only what is present time, what's happening right now, but also what's coming back based on your workflow mapping. Okay. Again, those roles will not be italicized. And then to the right of that, that's just some additional task information. The start date, which is the date that your task moves out of the no info in into your active workflow, your due date, your status. And then there's also a column here. This is actually now customizable, so you can pin a particular role here. So in my demo site, I have it as a tax manager. You can choose if you want it to be a responsible person or somebody else. And then we have some other information like last change date. Another piece of this is I wanted to mention the RAS calendar integration. So both sides of the scheduler module talk to each other. The reason why the integration is so great is that where you might not be putting all of your tasks on the calendar, which Justine is going to go through, you want to be able to see if there is time that's been booked for that resource. So under Calibre's financial management, for example, I can see that Jamie has 24 hours on the calendar because maybe she needs to go out to that client. So I can see not only hours that are, this is coming back to her in a later workflow mapping step, but I can also see what's booked. What's nice about this is that even, let's say Jamie didn't make it out to that client to go do the field work, it's not going to come off of the RAS because the RAS is status driven. So whether or not she makes it out to the client, it's still going to be here because it's still in the status of field work and it's still listed under her name. So you have that additional security that nothing's going to fall through the cracks. As I mentioned, as long as you're moving your tasks, this should be updating on its own. But let's say you're in a scheduling meeting. Let's say you have your tax department together and you're looking and you're saying, well, Jamie doesn't appear to have that much work assigned to her right now. But then we look out at the future and say, whoa, she has 170 hours budgeted. So if you want to make real-time changes, you're able to do that as well. So let's say I wanted to go ahead and reassign a job. I can go ahead and select in the checkbox next to the task. I can come up and I can reassign. And because Jamie is listed as the audit manager, I can go ahead, that will be pre-populated. I can go ahead and reassign someone. So there's this little C hyperlink. If I click on this, this is going to give you a list of your users. And then let's say I'm going to give it to Chris. I'm going to highlight his name and click Save and Apply. And then if it's a permanent change, this will speak back to the routing or control sheet and update the staffing assignment so that Chris is in the primary position for audit manager. If it's just temporary, I can uncheck this box and it will just put Chris in the secondary staffing assignment. But I can go ahead and just reassign that. Okay, so you have both the opportunity to view and then to make real-time decisions to avoid any bottlenecks or people being overstaffed or understaffed here in their scheduling meetings. One last piece I want to show you in connection with the RAS is just the ability to report on it. So if I go ahead and click this report button, going to give me two options for reports. It's going to give me the summary report. So it's going to give me basically a screen grab of what we were viewing before. And it's going to be rolled up by user and show me the hours on the My View page, and then in process, not on My View, and then any calendar hours scheduled. If I want to get the details behind it, I can click Go to Detail Report, and it's going to give me an exportable report here that's going to show me the resource, the client name, all of the tasks, and then it's going to break out the hours. Okay. And just like in our report section, we always recommend exporting this to Excel. That way you can go ahead and add pivot tables, throw filters on your data, and go from there. So that was the information that I had for you on the RAS. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Justina to take you through the calendar module. I'm just going to go ahead and make her presenter.
Hey, Kristen. Hi, everyone. My name is Justina, and I am one of the product managers here at XCM. I've been at XCM for about 2 years, and I have the pleasure of working on our scheduler products. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So like Kristen mentioned, I'm going to walk through now the calendar side of the house. Calendar is typically used for those larger engagements, but we've seen it also used for smaller engagements and jobs. So really, if you know who you want to book and when you want to book it, calendar's the right place for you. So as Kristen mentioned in the agenda, there are actually about 4 pages that I want to show, and the first one's the Schedule by Employee page, which you can see on the screen today. And what this page tells you is what's going on in your office, and it allows you to drill in by employee. So you can see right as we've landed on this page, you've got this really colorful heat map, and it draws your eyes and it immediately tells you what's going on. Dark green means that that user has full availability. Light green means that there's some availability. Gray means at capacity, they can't take anything else, and red means there are conflicts that need to be dealt with. This entire page is determined based off of these search parameters here. So by default, it'll pick your locations, but you can also select specific resources. You can also select departments as well as titles. You can also, once you've loaded in all of these employees, you can use your refine filters and say, I'm looking for specific employees that meet these criteria. You can use these filters to drill down. You also have the option to sort employees. The most popular one is this conflict. Hey, bring all my conflicts to the very beginning. Now, what's also great about the calendar is that you can customize it and you can really manipulate it to look at all the data you're looking for. And you can also save all these views. So using all of those different filters I've talked about, you can save those views just by hitting this option right here. So right now you can see on my screen, I'm looking at weeks, but if you're someone who wants to see by days or at a high level at a month basis, where everyone stands, you can certainly do that. You may say, hey, I need to start booking for our upcoming busy season. Take me to January. You can use this calendar icon to make those to get to that date. Now, by default, I have my calendar load up the upcoming 3 months, but you can use these double arrows right over here on these calendar icons to add more dates. So if you need to see the next 4 months, the next 5 months, you can certainly do that using those options right there. Now, as Kristen mentioned, you can see calendar data on the RAS. And vice versa, you can also see RAS data in the calendar. So if I click on these 2 arrows right here, you can see here I've got my RAS data. So in this column, it's telling me what's on that user's My View today and what's coming back to them. So as you're making calendar assignments, you can review this and say, okay, like this person might be a little too busy. Maybe I shouldn't be booking them for this larger engagement later on. All right, let's drill into a specific employee. So at the very beginning, Kristen was talking about the hecticness that comes with scheduling. And so we wanted to make it really easy for you to just be able to update the schedule at a moment's notice, whether you're in a maybe somewhat tense scheduling meeting or you've got a line at your desk of a bunch of scheduling changes that need to happen. You can very easily take this booking and you can drag it to someone. You can also take a booking and you can hit right click and you can see all of these different options. So there are different ways to manipulate this data and make changes on the fly. So let's use an example. So I'm going to take this booking right here, the Gentle Corporation, and I know that Mike is also booked the same week. But here you can see Mike actually already has a conflict. Let's say for this particular corporation, it requires someone who has agricultural experience. So I've got 42 users. How on earth am I going to find the employee who can take this off Mike's plate? Well, if I use my refine filters and I click on agricultural, I can see I actually have quite a few users. I'm going to take this and I'm going to give it to this user right here. And right there, I've remove that conflict. So again, making it really easy for you to be able to update this calendar and keep up with the craziness that comes with scheduling. All right, and now we're going to launch into our second polling question. I can make a resource the primary through the calendar, true or false? And just a friendly reminder, if you are looking for CPE credits, you do need to answer 3 out of the 4 questions we have today. All right, and looking at the results, 85% of you said true. And that's right, you absolutely can make someone the primary when you're booking through the calendar. So let's go ahead and make a create a booking in calendar. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight this, and you can see Mike's name was populated. And I'm going to look for the Gentle Corporation. And here you're finding the related workflow task that I'm going to associate this booking with. And here I found it, and I can see Mike, he's already in the audit staff role, and he's already populated. And I'm going to just fill in a job code, and I'm all set. So pretty easy. A few things I want to call out for those who have been using Calendar. You may notice that our calendar looks our booking slider looks a little different. We did do a recent update, and there are quite a few enhancements a part of it. So the first piece I want to call out is this please note. So here you can see that now that I've pulled up Mike and I've pulled up the client, all this information just got populated. I can see how many budgeted hours he has, how many scheduled hours he has, and how many he has remaining. So right now it looks like Mike is way over budget. What's also great is that I can hit and add another booking. So here I can add additional bookings. So let's say there are multiple dates that I need to book him on. I can certainly do that here. Now what's also great is if I were to take this booking right here, there's another option that's been added to the booking slider, and it says show more bookings. So for this particular resource, I can see that she's not only booked for October 26th, but she actually had something back in September. And you can certainly make changes all right here as well. Now, another common scenario that happens is, hey, I need to book a resource. And as I'm typing it in, I pick a client, and oh, I realize that there is no task created in workflow. In the past, you would have to jump to workflow. You had to go to the My View. You had to go to the utilities to create that task before coming back here and finishing up your schedule. Well, now we have the option that you can create the task right here on the calendar, making it super easy for you to create that task and keep going with scheduling. And then what's also great is you can actually create bookings that aren't tied to any workflow task. So if I need to block time, I certainly can, or if that user has PTO that you need to keep in mind as you're booking them, you can certainly add that to the calendar. Now the booking slider is available on all of the calendar pages that I'm about to show. All right, now the next page that I want to show is the schedule by task page. So if you want to see your users and the schedules associated for a particular client, a particular task, this is the page for you. And very similar to the schedule by employee page, you have to set your parameters. So you can search by specific clients, which I've done here. You can search by entity by user. So whether you want to use the My Client filter or you want to say, hey, show me all of the tasks that Kristen is listed on. You can certainly find her name in this list. Or if you're using the group functionality in XCM, so I need all the clients associated to the ABC group, you can do that here. So if I go ahead and search, you can see I have a few sort options. So I want to pull all my scheduled tasks up to the top. If I expand it, you can see all of the users that are listed on the control sheet and what roles they're scheduled for. You can see here everyone on the team. So again, a really great way to understand by engagement, who's scheduled, who's the team. So this is great for managers, for partners who really want to just focus in on what's going on with their clients. Now, the next page I want to talk about is our staffing management page. This is a new page that we released back in July. And what's great about this page is it combines what's happening on the control sheet with the calendar. We found that quite a few users like to make their staffing assignments on the control sheet, add their budgets, and then jump all the way to the calendar, using the information that was on the control sheet to make those bookings. Well, you can do that all here. So if I go to Jamie and I need to book her, here you can see I've got the booking slider. I can add a booking for her. And I can use that projected start date that I have here to tell me when I want to book her. But what's also great is I can make staffing assignment changes. So here I need to remove Gary and I need to assign Alyssa. And I need to change her hours, her budget to 10 hours. You can do that all here. What's also great is that you can add additional users using this button right here. And you can also remove users as well. So something that I've heard from clients is, hey, I want to remove some of these secondary users. You can now do that on this page. So again, a really great way to see what's going on in the control sheet and the calendar, and it's a consolidated view of those two. Now, how do you get to a page like this? A few ways. So you can right-click on a booking, and you'll see that you've got this option here. If you open the slider for that booking, you'll see this link here. And then last but not least, if I go to the control sheet and on the staffing section, you'll see this link here. So you can access it both through calendar as well as workflow. All right. Now, the last page I want to talk about is the My Calendar. The staff who are getting assigned to all these jobs, how do they know what they're booked on? So we've created this view called the My Calendar, and we recently made it a My View. I like to actually pin it as my default view, so this is the first thing I see when I log into XCM. I also still have the option to just click on my name, and I can pull it up at any point, regardless of where I am in the application. And here I can see what I'm booked on. It also has that same heat map that I have on the other calendar pages, so I can see, okay, I'm available on these days, I've got some bookings, but I've also got some conflicts that I need to go sort out. Now, all of the pages that I just showed are controlled by user rights. We understand that when it comes to scheduling, sometimes you really got to lock things down. You don't want people editing things, or they can only see a few things, or you give a lot of freedom. So we've given a different number of user rights for calendar. So you've got these read-only options. You can see My Calendar. You can decide whether you want to go full-on self-scheduling, let your staff update their schedules as is, or you can pick and choose what they can do on the calendar and update. And then same with that view management page. If you're wondering, staffing management page, if you're wondering why you haven't seen it in July, it's because you actually need to enable this right. And then it'll start appearing in the calendar as well as your control sheets. All right, and we are at our third polling question. How many calendar reports are there? 0, 1, 2, 3. All right, and it looks like 58% of you said 3, and that's correct. We have 3 calendar reports. So the first report is on our schedule by employee page. We have this weekly resource schedule. And essentially it takes everything you have loaded here and it gives you a printable version in a PDF. So here it'll pull the fact that I have these 7 users with this refine filter. If I use the sort option, it'll pull all of that. And it'll give me the option of what day I want to start that report. And it'll show me the next 6 weeks out. So again, using that same example of I want to see the first week of January and the next 6 weeks out, I would pick that date here on this calendar. I would sort the users how I would want, and then I'd run this PDF report. The next is the schedule forecast report, and it can be found with this icon right here. And here's that filter page, and this allows you to report by office. You can also report by user, and you can pull the summary or detailed. So whether you want a high level, what's everyone booked on, or I want to know the specifics. What's great about this report is it takes where that task that user's booked on, and it takes all the budget and actual information from the control sheet, and it puts it into this report. So you can compare how engagements are doing against their budgets. The next is the task calendar report, and that can be accessed on the schedule by task page with this icon. And here you can report off of clients. And very similar, you can pull the summary, you can pull the detailed. But what's also great is you have the option to pull to see what has been scheduled versus what has not been scheduled. Is my engagement fully booked? So this report can certainly help with that. All right, so now we're going to shift gears just a little bit. So Kristen and I talked about how do you use these two different modules, but we also want to talk about best practices, how to get set up so that you are using both these tools to the best of your abilities. Certainly make sure you're talking to your consultant, making sure that you have all of this correctly set up. There are some little things you can do that can really make both these tools really impactful. And so the first piece is updating managed users. So here in every user profile, we have this level of detail. You can determine what department they're in. Of course, you've got the locations, but even their title, their industry group, their niche, their expertise. And very similar to the example I used in the calendar, you can very easily, this all feeds into these filters that you see here on the calendar. Same with the RAS. By taking that time to really tag your employees, it makes it a lot easier to do that rescheduling, to make that scheduling a lot easier, quickly finding those users and really using this filter to the best of your ability. All right, and we are at our last polling question. Can I set different hours for seasonal employees? Yes or no? And again, this is the last polling question. You do need to answer 3 out of 4 of these to get CPE credit. All right, and 100% of you said yes. Excellent. I think I made that question a little too easy for you guys. So yes, in Manage Users, you actually have the ability to set specific schedules for certain individuals. So whether you have a group of interns and they have different schedules, you have folks who come in during the tax busy season to help out and they have different hours compared to the rest of the department, you can set these hours within their Manage Users profile. And when you go into the calendar or in the RAS, you'll see this little P right here to indicate that they're part-time, and you'll see that their hours will be reflected in the calendar or next to their name in RAS. So again, Manage Users is a really great tool to help make sure that you're set up for both scheduler products. The next big piece that we highly recommend is making sure you have your budgets and actual time in the control sheet. So for the RAS, you can see where the task stands as well as in terms of how much has this employee done against this job, as well as for the calendar reports, being able to compare what you've scheduled versus what has actually been done and documented. Being able to compare these data points together really helps make all the data you're collecting a lot more impactful. So we highly recommend really utilizing the budgets and actual piece of XCM. So you can actually work with your consultant to do a bulk import of your budget information. So I highly recommend reaching out to them if you don't already utilize this portion of XCM. All right. And then the last piece that I want to mention is that for the calendar, we do have an Outlook integration. So you can set up your users so that they can have a separate XCM calendar and they can compare it to their Outlook calendar. So they can see, okay, this is what I've got going on in XCM. This is what I'm booked for. These are my engagements, and they can see it all right there in Outlook. One less step for them to find what they're working on. So those are just some ways to really take advantage of calendar and RAS. Getting set up is so important, and it really does have some lasting benefits. So If you're not sure, if you have more questions, please obviously put it in the chat, but also reach out to your consultant to make sure that you are taking full advantage of all the features that the scheduler product has to offer. All right, and with that, that is our presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And we wanted to open it up for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks, ladies. There are a few questions in the question box, so I'll just read them off to you. And so the first one is there a minimum staff size you recommend before using the scheduler? Kristen or
I can take that. Yeah, I can take that. This is Kristen. Thank you to whomever asked that question. Great question. I think it really depends on the number of tasks or projects that you have going on at the firm. So you might have 5 users, but they might have a large number of projects or clients that they're working on. So I would say that it's really based on the volume of work and not necessarily the users. Obviously, the more users that you have, the more benefit that you're going to have, because you're trying to juggle all of these different balls and schedule different projects. So I would think that again, based on volume, but also the more users you have, the more value that you're going to derive from the scheduler product.
Great, thanks, Kristen. So the next question, I think, Justina, you just went over this, but we might want to just reiterate it again, is how are the actual hours on scheduler getting into the system? And Justina, I think you just touched on you can have it imported through your consultant.
So that is for your budget information. You can obviously manually put it into XCM. And Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but we do have an integration to help pull in some actual time, correct?
We do. So we have an integration with practice management. I think there's another question in the chat as well, perhaps about that, but we do have an integration with practice management where you can have your time flow through automatically through a nightly sync. So that would be populating the hours for the users on the staffing assignment sheet on the workflow side, which would then flow into the calendar piece, scheduler piece.
Great, thanks, ladies. All right, just a couple more questions here. One of the questions, are Cal and RAS used simultaneously?
I can take that. So they can be used separately, or they can be used together. So that would have been the piece that I mentioned about having the RAS-Cal integration. There are some firms that really have just a need to see the hours dashboard. They're not necessarily looking, let's say maybe it's a tax department and they're not looking to book resources out in the field or block them off for a week at a time, and they really just want to keep track of budget versus actual, make sure that they're not going out of scope, etc. So there are firms that will just use the RAS, just as there are firms that will just use the Cal. So if we have a firm and they only have an audit department or assurance or a test, whatever your firm may call it, they may choose to just use the calendar because they're using their job codes. Audit is usually annuitized work, so you're usually going out in the field around the same time every year. So they might just be using the calendar piece of it to manage their schedule and resources. But the RAS-Cal integration gives you the best of both worlds, especially if you're crossing departments, because it's going to let you show. It's going to let you see both the hours on the RAS, and then if you have resources that you need to book out, you can see that as well. So if nothing's falling through the cracks.
Great, thanks, Kristen. The next question is, if a task is moved from the task page, it does not move it on the resource allocator?
That is incorrect, actually. So as long as the task is a task type that is set up in that configuration that I showed in the utility. So as long as it's a task type that has been set up, and as long as it's going to a status that has been mapped, you'll remember I talked about the statuses that we were considering not started yet and the statuses that we were considering completed. So if that task was configured as part of your RAS configuration to be tracked on the dashboard, once you move that task, that should update the RAS automatically. That's the beauty of the RAS, is it's supposed to just mimic your workflow, which is why only tasks that have a workflow mapping associated show up.
Great, thanks, Kristen. And then, is there typically a scheduler, or can all users be responsible for their schedules?
And you want to take that one?
Yeah, so it's really up to you and what works best for your team. I know for the calendar, it's certainly set up so that you can have self-scheduling. Staff can make calendar assignments using the My Calendar option. We also have some firms who only want to give read access to their higher management and want to give only the ability to create bookings to their scheduling team. So it's really up to you, and based off of the user rights, the calendar and even RAS is flexible enough so that you can have either.
Great, thanks, Justina. And we do have one last question. I'm not sure, we may have to punt this one to another person in the firm, but how many audit firms are currently using RAS or Cal for their audit department?
I could take a guess, but I think we should probably pull those metrics internally. I know I have about 80 clients and I have a large number that are using it, but across company-wide, I think we should probably pull that and get them a more exact number. Great question.
Mm-hmm. And that is all of the questions I'm seeing right now in the question pane. So I will say thank you, ladies, for the presentation. Very helpful, very informative. Thank you, everybody who has participated in the session today. As I mentioned at the beginning, this has been recorded, and a copy will be sent to you within 24 hours of the close of this session. So around 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, you should see it. We will also have both the recording and the PowerPoint posted on our Help Center. So if anyone in your firm could benefit from this session, they will have the opportunity to see that information out on the Help Center as well. So with that, we are going to close out this session for today. I want to just thank everybody and hope everybody has a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.